I have a diagram that is in the post, a starter kit for peacemaking as another illegal war breaks out. And the diagram has these 4 points. And the 4 points are silent prayer, rhythms that ground us in and for, to media intake boundaries, to be informed yet responsive. And that's I'll keep moving on. 3, community support, that don't isolate yourself. It's actually about creating communities of love. 1 person can make a point, 2 people can hold a conversation, but 3 people, Dave Andrews says, can create a space. Create a space where creativity is increased and we can process our grief and we can be a part of collective action. And 4, discerning the next steps. What is the transformative way to compost what we're feeling and take action together, and then it returns to that first step.
Hey friends, welcome to Across the Divide. This is a difficult moment for us who are committed to the work of justice and peacemaking. We are barely coming out of a genocide in Gaza, still reckoning with the catastrophe that we saw over there. And now there's another war now on Iran. At least 1,300 Iranians have been killed, including 160 girls that were killed in an elementary school. Also, more than 100 Lebanese people killed, 6 American soldiers, as well as at least 11 Israelis. All are sacrificed at the altar of death. And war continues to ravage throughout the Middle East. And of course, some Christians, yet again, are at the forefront, cheering on for more death and destruction. Many are seeing this moment as a sign for the apocalypse. Others are using the just war tradition to baptize this war as holy, as righteous, as good. So how do we deal with all of this? How do we respond to this moment? To help me unpack all of this, I am joined here by the wonderful Jarrod McKenna. He's an Australian Peace Award-winning pastor and social change educator. He's the founding director of Common Grace, an Australian social justice group, and also the co-founder of the global Gaza ceasefire pilgrimage movement. This is a really important conversation. Hopefully it's edifying for you, especially at this moment as we reflect on the tragedies we're seeing coming out of Iran and also throughout the Middle East. This is our moment for us to respond to this violence by relentless pursuit of prayer and peacemaking. So here's my conversation with Jarrod McKenna. Hey, Jarrod, you've been doing a lot of work speaking and writing and advocating for peace, and you're someone who's committed to that work. And now we're at this pivotal moment now, once again, where the drums of war are banging and Christians are falling in line in support of violence and death.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been wrestling with this for the last 2-3 years, especially since Gaza, since October 7 and the genocide that unfolded. And I'm wondering, how have you been processing all of this? This kind of insatiable, it seems, insatiable desire for death and for violence.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. I probably need to be honest and start with not well, but I'm trying. And so if there are any listeners out there who feel the same, that like, I'm not sure how well I'm, like, how do we start to comprehend not one human life lost, but the scale of which this is coming at us, and the stories that surround it that actually actively engage in cover up and dehumanization of the lives that are lost as well. So I've been trying to, for a while now, become much more serious about being a person of prayer and not allow that to mean some form of escapism nor magical thinking. And I know it's a bit self-indulgent, but I recently wrote after this war on Iran started, something that has been a process that's been at the forefront since the genocide in Gaza has started. So if you bear with me, can I read a paragraph that is a little bit poetic, that hopefully starts to map the terrain of what we experience in prayer, rather than talk about prayer as a ought to or must do or should do. Is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead. Yes,
yeah.
For sure.
So this is from my latest Substack, and it's in a section called Thoughts on Prayer as Bombs Fall. And this article was written as like a starter kit for peacemaking, when hearing of another illegal war starting. And so the paragraph reads, I need night air stillness. As bombs fall, post-Compline skies are the only air my heart can access oxygen. In holy darkness that metabolizes our rage and our grief and our anxiety and our guilt, and if we're honest with ourselves, often our indifference and our despair. In this dew-soaked ground, grace, all that can be composted in me. It is here that my funk becomes fertile. It is here where action on behalf of the afflicted both naturally and miraculously grow. Apathy and apatheia share 6 letters, yet spell out the difference between a hardness of heart and that evergreen tenderness towards the Holy Spirit. A tenderness that can be received as our politics, not the politics of liberation through mercy. Not politics as grasped from ideologies, but the tenderness received from the nail-scarred hands of the one who calls to us from under the rubble, both in Gaza, as our dear friend has so beautifully written about, as well as the elementary school for girls in Minab. I want to welcome this devastating tenderness into my heart as Lord and Saviour, again and again and again. Daniel, it's my attempt to try and be honest with myself, mate. I'm having a really hard time, like actually. And as a pastor, what I've heard, particularly after yet another war, like we've got Pakistan and Afghanistan starting last week, Israel and the US hitting Lebanon, and straight after Iran as well. And people have kind of forgotten what Lebanese people are experiencing in this moment as well. I have heard people come to me and go, I'm just not watching the news anymore. I can't take it. Or I can't stop doom scrolling. I can't stop just taking it in. And so some of the things I think pastorally that maybe we can open up in our time together is, how do we have good boundaries about keeping our hearts open amidst the horror? How do we transform the terror and the trauma so that we might receive the gift and grace of a tenderness of heart?
Hey friends, I would like to invite you to consider attending the Christ at the Checkpoint conference. It's happening in Bethlehem this year in May 26th until the 30th. It uses the tagline, Kingdom Ethics in the Face of War and Genocide. This conference is the flagship conference of the Bethlehem Institute for Peace and Justice at Bethlehem Bible College. It gathers Christians from around the world to come together and wrestle with questions of faith, peace, and justice, with guidance and teaching from Palestinian Christians. At this dark moment in history, especially after what happened in Gaza, the conference offers a biblically grounded and culturally rich space for honest engagement, faithful discipleship, and global solidarity rooted in Christ and in his teachings. We invite you as Palestinian Christians to come and see, to join us in person this year as a powerful act of presence and solidarity, and to bear witness to shared faith and hope as we seek Christ at the checkpoint. Again, the conference is happening from May 26th until the 30th. Registration is open right now. So to register, to get more information, visit christatthecheckpoint.bethbc.edu, and I hope to see you there. Let's do that. It's such an important thing to do, but I want us to still unpack what's happening and the tragic reality of Christian complicity in all of this.
Yeah.
And then as we move through our analysis, I would love to come back to this and reflect what ought the righteous do. And I thank you, Jarrod, for highlighting the girls at the elementary school in Minab and the devastation. Because for me, when I saw the footage of the wreckage being the bags being pulled out and the beautiful tender bodies pulled out, I couldn't but think of Gaza, and we've seen that footage so many times.
And for me, Daniel, it was our friend Muntha Isaac's words around Christ under the rubble
Yeah,
that came to mind for these. And I think the numbers are up to 165 children aged between 7 years old and 12 years old.
yeah, that's
Lord
right.
have mercy.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, for me, Jarrod, it's once again the Christians who are at the forefront to explain this away, to justify it, and now just this is we're recording on Thursday night, but the Congress just or the Senate just passed shut down power of war resolution. They would not want to vote on it to give Congress the power to restrain this war. And of course, those who are voting for the war are mostly all Republicans except one, Rand Paul. It's just devastating. It's like it's the same Christians who supported the genocide. It's the same Christians who supported Afghanistan, and now Afghanistan is now in another, not to take agency from the Afghanis and the Pakistanis now, but also we can't ignore the complicity and the destruction of Afghanistan because of the Christian support for war. And I'm right there with you, Jarrod. Like this is a tragic, like, can't we just take a break? Can't Christians just, especially those in power, not to oversimplify this, but what a tragic legacy that the church, Christian politicians, Christian leaders are leaving now. And you told me, I don't want to share too much detail here, but you mentioned a story for someone, a Christian, who, because of all of this stuff, decided to leave Christianity and become a Muslim because of what they've seen from Christians.
And can I spell that out just a little bit without giving details, Daniel, just so people appreciate? This is somebody who's intimately connected to the suffering, and their reasons for reverting to Islam from an active Christian faith was not that the way of Christ was too difficult in this moment, but they saw from too few Christians something that looked like Christ. And yet they saw from the Muslim community in their city people who were embodying Christ's example and teachings, and her attraction to Islam was the life of Christ. So when you have those who call themselves Christian green-lighting genocide and then blasphemously using the scriptures to proof text death reigning, I think we can hardly judge those who look for something that's more Christ-like. And it's a judgment against the church that it wasn't found amongst us.
Yeah. In some ways, that person is closer to Jesus than if they were only Christian following Jesus. Yeah, because there's that sense in Islam that you've seen heavily in the last 3 years of just complete surrender and giving up everything to God, faithfulness, patience. We saw this coming from Gaza. God is all I need. God is sufficient.
Yes.
And this is a Muslim mom suffering who just lost her kids from a bomb that was paid for by us, especially in the West. So there's that faithfulness and resilience and justice orientation in Islam that is showing up in the last 2 years. That's like, what happened? What happened to us? Okay, well, Jarrod, let's try to unpack some of that stuff that is happening right now, because I'm referencing here your article on Substack, and we'll make sure everyone make sure to follow Jarrod's Substack. It's going to be in the show notes below. Just
Daniel, are you on Substack? Yeah.
I am, but I'm not active on it. I mostly go there.
I've only been there for like 4 weeks, and I mean, no platform is perfect, right? But it actually feels like Twitter felt like 15 years ago. Like it's been so lovely. And I don't know whether it's because it's a platform for writers, and there's a
Mm,
thoughtfulness, but it seems like the algorithm isn't merely designed to bring outrage and make money, but instead we can actually connect with each other. So, I
love
mean,
that.
I don't want
Love
to
that.
be an evangelist for a platform that clearly has problems, but I've enjoyed it the last month.
Okay. Okay. No, I've been thinking about, now I finished my PhD, Jarrod. Now
Yeah, that's right.
I'm taking a year off from writing, and then
Mm,
and then hopefully I can get back to, I've been given a lot of public talks and I've been writing a lot those, but I haven't been going public with my reflections, but maybe soon,
yeah,
to be
wonderful.
determined. Okay. So Jarrod, we've seen a lot of comments. I don't know if you saw this in the news recently. Um, in the Department of Defense, some of the language coming out, that the government, the Trump, the president is God's agent for the apocalypse. He's bringing
Mm,
about Christ through this war. This war is seen through the apocalyptic kind of lens of Gog and Magog, and all that kind of nonsense, if I'm correct.
mhm,
And you see this kind of, the what you kind of refer to, this kind of weaponization of faith. I mean, there's a lot to say about how problematic and dangerous and wrong that kind of apocalyptic theology is, especially through the lens of dispensationalism.
mhm.
But there's this kind of, excuse my language, just kind of this fetishism of
Yeah,
getting giddy, just like, oh
yes.
look, it's happening. People are dying. Let's justify it. Let's baptize violence and death and the dead girls in Iran,
Mm,
in something that is beautiful and good. And let's use our Bible. Now, this is, I've always said this in all of my presentations. This is nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun. Christians have always done that,
mm,
whether through slavery, through the Crusades, through apartheid,
mm,
anti-Semitism, and the Holocaust. Um, the disregard for the Palestinians at large, for
mhm.
the last 80 years. So this is nothing. This is nothing surprising. Yeah, how do you reflect on this phenomenon where you see so many Christians are just so quick to use biblical language, to use the scriptures, which should be scriptures of love and mercy and forgiveness and
Mhm.
healing and truth, to be texts of manuals for destruction and war?
Yeah. I want to draw on Reverend Dr. Mitri Rehab when he talks about apocalyptic faith, because I think there is no doubt that our choices, or it's not a choice between whether faith will be apocalyptic or not. It's what kind of apocalypse. And the apocalyptic faith of the horrific, crusading, genocidal, anti-human, antichrist agenda that is coming out of the Pete Heskeths and others at the moment, both in rhetoric and in practice, in terms of how is it that US bombs targeted as one of the first sites hit a primary school and elementary school. What is the intelligence that is being drawn upon that that is the what's being hit? And so a shorthand for people going, how do I express this to other Christians who are sincere, but like sincerely supporting horror? I mean, one of the easiest memory verses is just go Revelation 1:1. And I mean, I've got it open in front of me, and to remind people that this is the revelation or apocalypse of Jesus Christ. So it's not Revelations, and anybody who's quoting, quote unquote, the book of Revelations with an S, that plural is a giveaway that you don't know what the scriptures are actually about generally, and the book of Revelation is about in particular, because it is the revelation of Jesus of Nazareth, that unarmed, suffering servant who, though crucified, God raised from the dead. That's our gospel. And so to be able to go clearly that we need an apocalyptic faith, and the apocalypse, what's being revealed, what's being unmasked, which is what the Greek word refers to, is the life, death, burial, resurrection, and ascension of our Lord, is a radical affirmation of his teachings and his way of the cross that trusts in resurrection power. And so when anybody is approaching this with, oh, this is history being worked out, as if It wasn't until 5 minutes ago that some passage in Revelation 19 actually made sense to church history. Like, not only is it ignorant of the
Right.
beauty,
Yeah.
it is not merely ignorant, it is dangerous. And so the question throughout the book of Revelation is, how is this almost like if you're on Google Maps and you click bird's eye view and you're seeing the neighborhood from above? So if the Gospels are the street view, where you're seeing the houses or the shops or the parks on the maps that you're using, and then you click the view where it's looking from above, that's what the book of Revelation is. And for us to have clarity around this and be able to shut down immediately that this isn't spelling out things that are yet to happen. This is actually saying what has happened in the life of Jesus and its implications for what's yet to happen. And they're two very different ways of working. One calls us to the nonviolent way of Jesus and this radical confrontational love that saves us. And the other actually plays into something which is diabolical. And Daniel, I use the word deliberately. With talk of the apocalypse, we have two options. One is the singular salvific unveiling of who God is in Jesus, and the other is a satanic multiple legion of ways to distort history to understand or make sense of this moment. So that's what I'd offer people in terms of practically, like to change the conversations and bring the conversations, particularly with Christians, back to what it is to follow Christ and take our baptism seriously and live in the power of the Spirit. But for those who are trying to get underneath this practice and why it's so common, I offer that this is actually a trauma response. It's a trauma response of those who are involved in colonization and the dehumanization that it costs of yourself to dehumanize others has to be escaped. And so this fantastical way of actually using the scriptures to play out, all these things have to happen for some greater purpose, is a way of avoiding the abyss and the void of what is happening in this moment and protecting ourselves to Christ calling to us from under the rubble, whether it be in Gaza or the West Bank or Iran or Afghanistan or on the Pakistan border, and avoiding hearing the resurrected one call to us from those who are suffering by caking a layer of sick and sadistic theology and Bible verses over the top.
Yeah, this is the apocalypse again. Like maybe this is another revelation to use the plural, right? Like there is a revelation here that is happening, right? Like if this is a trauma response here, like there's this kind of anti-colonial or post-colonial kind of critique you're presenting here for us that we've, in the West, you've inherited a legacy of power and domination, and you're kind of, in some ways, you're itching for it, right? Like this is what your ancestors did, and you're kind of traumatized that we created a world of democracy and peace. And it's like, no, I cannot have this. I need to fight.
Daniel,
so that's
it's the dynamics of an alcoholic seeking to escape their alcoholism by going down to the pub and having another drink.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. That's so sad. To go into that point of that person who left Christianity, why why is faith like Christ is so compelling, right? Like we are so drawn to Jesus, but like why is it so easy for people to leave Jesus behind like this in the dirt, right? Like our psyches and our traumas and our obsessions with power and bloodthirst are just taking over. They're just too strong, and it's such a hard reality to deal with. But hey, Jarrod, some would say we are doing this for the Iranians. Iranians are cheering in the streets that we are liberating them. This is a good thing, right? The Khamenei was a terrible dictator. Nothing positive, very little positive we can say, perhaps, about the regime in Iran. But now we use this language that is this is like deja vu for some of us. We've heard that language before. What's the response to that? To so many Christians who are saying, hey, this is actually good for the Iranians. We're doing it for the Iranians.
And I think this is the importance of where we started the conversation. in what it is to become people of prayer, people for whom grace isn't merely a doctrine, it becomes our experience as we open to our own stuff. Because everybody should have been crying out with the Iranian people, whether it's since the Green Revolution and their cries for democracy, for the nation to actually be handed back to the people, against the authoritarian cruelty that has been going on. And it's not a question of whether it was horrific. It's a question of what saves us from horror. This is a theological question. And when we claim that Jesus saves, what does that mean for the underground church, which has been growing in Iran? And what does it mean for the general Iranian people? And Daniel, you know this about my story, and I write about this at length in that Substack article on a starter kit for peace. But I've spent my whole adult life influenced and by the Catholic worker community, and even as someone who's not Catholic, has spent my life opening my home, providing a Christ room, a room for people to stay who would otherwise be without a home, the unhoused. And they are people returning from jail in my city. There are people who otherwise are living on the streets in my city, but they're also asylum seekers and refugees and migrants who haven't been able to find and have found themselves in a situation of homelessness. Over my adult life, I would have lived with easy over a dozen Iranian refugees. And I had the incredible blessing, Daniel, of not just welcoming Christ into my home in Iranian refugees, but seeing Iranian refugees like actually come to Christ, and the privilege it's been to baptize Persian Christians and to disciple them and pray with them and be a best man at some of their weddings and officiate others of their weddings and dedicate their children. So I know this pain intimately, and it's the reality of going to the gym with friends who are Iranian and seeing across their back these huge scars and daring not to ask, but one day it being offered to me that this was acid that was poured on me by the religious police because I refused to participate. I wasn't anti, I wasn't an activist. I just refused, didn't have any interest in politics. I refused to participate. I've lived in the same home as people who have had family members tortured, who have been whipped, who have had family members just disappeared. And I'll be honest, Daniel, some of them in this moment are rejoicing. And I think it's really important that I don't judge the responses of those who are suffering to the person who is politically responsible for that suffering. But it's not the only response. While some of them are rejoicing, and part of it is relief that the international community seems to be doing something after doing nothing for such a long time. The death of their family members wasn't enough. Their torture wasn't enough. The ongoing oppression wasn't enough. And in this moment, they've gone, finally, someone else is listening. But some of them are sensitive to the fact that they're worried that there are agendas that aren't for their freedom despite the propaganda, but instead for just destabilization. Some of them have expressed to me they worry about an ongoing civil war of 90 million people that will continue in a vacuum of leadership. Some of them worry that instead of like actually the pro-democracy movement gaining strength, that it will be a return to what the revolution in 1789 was seeking to overthrow, which was the exploitation of the people in a different way. And so it's coming back to the reality that just as we saw in Iraq, that the attempts to drive out Satan with Satan actually produced ISIS. Mm-hmm. Well, in Iran, if we try and drive out the devil with the devil there, what devil is going to be left in its place? And I think we need to take seriously that the Iranian community isn't a monolith. Yes, there are some, understandably, who are thankful that things have changed. And there are others who have the capacity at the moment to actually hold the ambiguity of, but what's that change going to be? And what devastation might this lead to? And shame on us who run to quick answers of, oh, it's a good thing, when we've never been in solidarity, we've never stood with them in their suffering, we've never wept with them, and we've never been involved in the pro-democracy movement. This is an altar call for all of us to go, it's not about the suffering of some, which is what ideology always wants to do, make an us-them kind of thing. But the experience of the liberation, which is mercy in prayer, what it is to become a person of prayer, is we don't have to choose between the suffering of children in Gaza and the suffering of children in Iran. We can choose to go the way of Jesus and actually speak and listen and be a part of joining solidarity with those who are afflicted.
Yeah, that's how it should be. You think it should be easy. You think we can humanize these Muslim children and Arab and Iranian children and Palestinian children, and it's so hard. And it's just that language, Jarrod, is just so problematic. Like should we just keep doing that? Like if any country we don't like, could we just go invade it and say use that excuse of democracy spreading
Right.
and just go, and with no regard for the complexity of that society. I mean,
That's right.
Iran is like a 4,000-year-old civilization,
Yes.
and a very
Yeah.
complex society.
Yeah.
But also, do we want to go back to the Pahlavi regime and the Shah and the abuse of the people back then, a puppet government that was before the revolution? It's just the lack of foresight or even understanding of Iran. But then you use you use the people as talking points. They become
Yes.
objects in your propaganda.
Yes.
It's not,
That's
you
right.
don't actually care about the people.
That's right.
At the end of the day, you're not really caring about them. And that's not how you do it. And obviously the people have been through a lot since the revolution, and also Western sanctions on the government also have not been helpful to the people. The people have been suffering for a long time. So is it really about the people, or is it really about lobby interests, and is it really about apocalyptic thinking? But then you wanna make yourself look good and sound good.
Yeah.
So you say, yeah, we're here for democracy and for the people.
And Daniel, it's that Audre Lorde quote about, like, when people tell you who they are, you best believe them the first time. And Netanyahu has
Right.
been very clear for nearly 40 years that this has been a project.
Right.
And I don't think there's a plan. And so the real risk of like an outbreak of an endless civil war that could be worse than what happened in Iraq is like that is a tangible reality in this moment that we need to face up to, because it's quite possible that some political powers have no greater plan other than chaos, which means that they feel under less threat.
Yeah, no, for sure. Listen, Jarrod, I was at a church in Austin last Sunday. I spoke at a church, and it's a fairly a good church, and they were sharing about their concerns and hopes, and what's been happening with them. And one of the lay people mentioned that, hey, I'm kind of worried about the strikes in Iran. And the pastor, a very gentle person, a very pastoral person, he was like, yeah, this is. Thanks for pointing that out. And this is there's a conversation about just war theory right now, and this kind of war kind of falls in line with the fifth criterion of just war, which is the preventive war. And I was so shocked. And when I went, I was preaching that day, and I was like, I have to start by acknowledging this. This is not a just war. This does not satisfy the fifth criterion. For a preventive war, you need to know that this person is actually getting ready to attack you. That's like someone having a gun in their house, for example, is not a reason for you to go attack them. But if you know that they're going to use the gun imminently against you, then maybe there's a justification. And I don't know if people know this about me. I'm very critical of just war theory anyway. But also, if you want to quote just war theory, do not misquote it to justify this. So yeah, I don't know. How have you been wrestling with this very sloppy and I think very antithetical way to think about the war when it comes to how we think about Jesus and peacemaking?
Yeah, one of the things that I put in the starter kit for peacemaking at the outbreak of another illegal war was actually just war tradition. and like how to understand it. And one of the ways that I put it, that's probably a very Jarrod way of putting it, but it's not a unique take, is I say the Christian just war tradition is the armed wing of an anti-war movement, which probably needs unpacking. But
Yeah.
what's really
Unpack it for us.
important, what's really important to say is that the way of enemy love, the way of the cross, the way of the nonviolence of Jesus is not an optional extra. It is the heart of discipleship. And that is regardless of whether we are shaped by labels that we might not use, but are labels that others might use around the tradition of Christian pacifism or the tradition of just war. That both these traditions do not dismiss the way of the cross. Where they differ is not in an insistence on enemy love, not in doing away with Jesus' way of confrontational nonviolence, but the question of when other people are suffering, is it ever justified to take up the way of the sword in pursuit of justice? And the reason why I say that the just war tradition is the armed wing of an anti-war movement is that the just war tradition is an incredibly rigorous criteria for assessing whether Christians should go to war. And if it was taken seriously, 70%, because apparently 70% of the US military identify as Christian, 70% of the military wouldn't have rocked up to this war. Christians could have stopped this war by just applying the just war criteria, not Christian pacifism. This is not a tradition that says there is no place. This is a tradition that says there is a limited place under this criteria. And the criteria is really strict. Like it's, I say that the just war theory or the just war tradition isn't that war is just, nor is it just a war, as if all wars, like we live in a fallen world, it doesn't matter. It's like, can I actually obey the orders of my commander, or do I need to obey Christ if it hasn't met this criteria? And I encourage people to go and study the criteria and like actually, search online what the last popes have actually said. We've got the three last popes of the Catholic world who have said that they've put serious question marks whether just war criteria can be applied in a world where the kind of armaments that are being used are at a scale which is literally nuclear. And so for people to take seriously that these are the two kind of broadly faithful responses that the Christian tradition in its breadth has held to. And now some will be surprised. They're like, Jarrod, like you have 2 National Peace Awards, like your whole life has been like teaching nonviolent social change on like 4 continents around the world for 20 plus years. Why are you talking about just war theory? Just war theory deserves our respect and our support. And churches should have supported Christians in the Vietnam War in applying the just war theory, so no Christians go to the Vietnam War. Right. Churches should have supported Christians in the invasion of Afghanistan and not going into and being part of the invasion of Afghanistan. Churches should have supported Christians in not being a part of the invasion of Iraq and refusing to obey orders. That is equally true with what is happening right now. So if someone is trying to go, oh yes, but just war allows for, you need to go, no, there's actually 3 Christian traditions of how to respond to war. We've mentioned 2. One is the Christian pacifist position. The other is the just war position, which we've spelt out as a rigorous, strict criteria for what wars we can go to. Otherwise, they must be refused. And that's why it's like the armed wing of a no-war movement. Like Christians aren't to support any and all wars. Just war criteria says, is this criteria met? Otherwise, you are alongside the Christian pacifists that are saying the same thing. Now, the other option that we actually hear coming out of the US at the moment is the holy war tradition. And I'll read to you, Daniel, what I wrote in the article about it. I said, of course, there is a Christian tradition I haven't named. That is an option. It's the Holy War tradition. But to be clear, this tradition of Bible quoting while crusading is accepting the devil and all his works. It is blasphemy, and it has been condemned as heresy. Crusades are to be confessed as sin, not romanticized and glorified in tattoos on political leaders with titles like war secretary. We've got to be really, really clear that if it's not just war and it's not Christian pacifism, it is the horror, the blasphemy, the idolatry, and the heresy of holy war, which wants to use the scriptures to dominate, dehumanize, and it comes killing, stealing, and destroying. And we need to name it clearly as of the devil.
I think there's some kind of study that can be done about that kind of crusader language with Islamic jihad and militarism, because they are similar approaches, similar understandings of your own piety and righteousness against the wicked who you're against, and the same usage of the texts, the scriptures to justify your position. So it's interesting to say that about the U.S. government and compare it with these groups.
And it is because of the Quran that our beloved Muslim neighbors feel that there is a limited place for taking up the sword in pursuit of justice.
Right.
But as one of my mentors and friends, Lee Camp, says, it is despite the New Testament, that Christians feel the same way. So the Islamic tradition is actually both philosophically and theologically more equipped to consider these issues because their scriptures talk directly to it. While the New Testament is absent because the assumption in the New Testament and the witness of the primitive church is the answer of when Christians can go to war is the only way we go to war is unarmed to unarm others. And it's not a quietism that sits back, but we know that early Christians were in the military. Some Christian pacifists don't like that. But those who actually support military action, what they don't like about it is the reason we know that some early Christians were in the military is because they refused to wear the amulet, which was a sign of worship to Caesar, and they refused to bear the sword, which was Caesar's way of conquering. And they didn't leave the military. They stayed there as an unarmed witness seeking to disarm the world in a way that is better than war. It's the way of Jesus. And they were martyred for it.
Yes, exactly.
And they were martyred for it, and that's why we have their stories, their witness. And it's that prophetic place where it's not a self-righteous pacifism of my hands are clean, I don't want to be involved, I'm just going to go say my prayers. What prayers are we saying that doesn't open us to the cries of those who are afflicted? That isn't the prayers that our Lord taught us, let alone how Jesus modeled how to pray. Prayer should lead us to the place where we have the kind of prophetic courage to stay in the systems that are broken, but to not use their way of conquering, and instead be prepared for the whole systems to fall down on us as we expose, as we take part in the apocalypse, that Jesus is the revelation of who God is and is also the exposure of everything that crucified him, that God is not in the business of crucifixion, we are, but Jesus offers us a way out through the grace of the resurrection to a new way of participating. I'm sorry, brother, I've stepped into the pulpit for a while. I feel like it's Sunday and I'm preaching, but I hope you can hear my passion.
Yeah, totally, I can hear it, yeah.
We need the clarity of thought to be as gentle as doves and wise as serpents in the moments where war starts. Otherwise, we as baptized believers are caught on our back foot, and we will either disappear into quietism or support one of two or more horrific options that both are calling for war.
And that's honestly, Jarrod, thank you for the preaching. I love that that coming out. And this is so necessary for us. Thank you for that, Jarrod. I think it's really powerful and necessary. And I think, Jarrod, this is why I would go beyond what you're saying and say, you said that you respect just war theory or the just war tradition. And I'm like, if this tradition has no applicability and has no power to rein in our power-hungry, violence-hungry Christians, then, throw it away. Like, there's no use for it. If it has no power, at the end of the day, we need to follow Jesus. And if this tradition has become like a weapon again, a bludgeon, to just keep using it to like attack Iraqis, attack Iranians, attack Palestinians. So yeah, I see the point. Theoretically speaking, it's a good framework, and it's a nice theoretical way for us to think about warfare. But as long as it kind of gives this inclination, hey, you can do war if you do this, like this
Mm-hmm.
kind of permissibility that it
I
provides
hear
for
you. Yeah.
us, for me, it's like, okay, I'm out. This is
Yeah.
just not, this is
Yeah.
not Jesus for me. So that's the thing.
And
And as long as Christians hold power, as long as the empire is Christian since the 4th century, I'm
mhm.
very wary of any kind of tradition that tries to sanctify violence, because we know
Yes.
what power does to people. And especially,
Yes.
we can tell what it's doing to Christians.
Yeah. And I respect it in the same way that I respect other than Christian traditions as holding wisdom,
Sure.
but
Okay.
it's not the way of Christ. And
Got it.
I've seen the power of the just war tradition in practice in a number of friends who were discharged from the military,
Mm,
for refusing to go to war. And I want to affirm them, not just as a pastor, but as their brother, your integrity in going, this war is not just and doesn't meet this tradition. And they were written off as like being pacifist agitators. And the great irony is like, no, this is the only way Christians could. And so there is a real danger that if we dismiss this, and some people have accused the late great Catholic Pope Francis as saying there is no place for just war theory, and the response is, does this create a vacuum where Christians feel like their only response is the realpolitik of the ends justifies the means, genocide for a greater good?
right.
And this is a way of actually holding those who claim the name of Christ accountable, and saying, how does it, because if it doesn't meet this criteria. But it also has very important things that I think those who identify as Christian pacifists can't lose sight of. The just war tradition, because of the actual criteria, the questions around is it being waged by a legitimate authority, is actually about, do we actually support international bodies such as the UN? Now, we might have huge critiques of the UN for hypocrisy, but hypocrisy only like Donald Trump isn't a hypocrite, because Donald Trump doesn't hold to high ideals that he fails to
Mm,
reach.
right.
The UN might be hypocritical, but those things that they say that they're about, I think Christians, and this is one of the gifts of the just war tradition. I've been accused, Daniel, this week of being someone who makes steel man arguments as opposed to straw man arguments.
Sure.
That might be a case of this. But
Right.
I want to be. I want to do unto others who hold the just war tradition as I'd want them to do unto me, because apparently all the scriptures are summed up in that. I want to love my neighbor who actually thinks there is a place for war as I love myself, taking seriously where they're coming from. And one of the gifts of the just war tradition is that it holds to account these international bodies that aren't supposed to be about colonialism and are supposed to be about human rights. And I know there is a shadow history, there is a night side to that tradition, which you grew up in the midst of, that must be named.
Right.
Aboriginal Australians still experience that night side of
Mm,
that tradition. But if we lose the prophetic call, so even though it's political, hearing Starmer say that he doesn't support Trump in the UK, despite the fact the UK are already involved. It's their military bases in Cyprus that have been hit by Iran because they were involved. And even though they said it would only be used for humanitarian means, those bases in the south of Cyprus were used for data that was collected by the Israeli government to help in the genocide. We
right.
have to have
Yeah.
our eyes open to those realities, and still, like those that went before the king, like St. Francis going before uh, Shah Solomon, the leader of the Muslim world at the time, and calling them to the way of Christ, or at least calling them to the best values that they claim. I think that's
Right.
part of
Yeah.
why it's important to talk about the just war tradition, because some Christian pacifism can be more interested in self-righteous validation of I'm not wrong than they are the suffering of those who are receiving real wrong.
Yeah, that's valid, Jarrod, and you're doing a great job steel manning the position. So, well done. I hear you. I hear you. I think, yeah, I can see the practical or the ethical emphasis of just what
Mm,
that the tradition to help us
mhm.
navigate. Wait, we need to pull out from this. This is obviously a
Oh,
distortion of that tradition. It just for me, I'm just saddened that that never does anything. So
yeah. I hear you,
there's that
brother. I really do.
revolt of conscience and of ethics. Yes, we cannot stand for this, but at the end
Yeah.
of the war, the machinery of war is gonna churn, and it's gonna destroy, and it's gonna go on. Just a small correction, Jarrod. Britain just came out saying that the strikes on Cyprus were not from Iran. The drones or whatever they
Oh,
used could not
really?
have come from Iran.
Wow.
So
Is
there's
that
a
in the
big
last 24
question.
hours?
This is in the last few hours. Yeah, Thursday afternoon I saw this. Yeah. So I mean, did they come from somewhere closer to Cyprus? Okay. Well, we don't. We don't. We don't.
I'm
We,
picking up what you're putting down. It's important not to engage in conspiracies, and at the same time, we have to ask these questions. Yeah.
I mean, it could be, to be fair, it could be Hezbollah, it could be Lebanon. We're not really sure, but they would not tell us where they. But they were like, it's not from Iran, but it's from somewhere much closer. But they would not tell us where from. So anyway, we'll see. We'll see what happens. We need to wrap this up, Jarrod, and I wanted to talk with you about the Bondi attack in Australia, but I feel like we don't have a lot of time because I would love to kind of go back to the kind of how we began the conversation. How do we move forward from here as peacemakers, especially those of us who listen to this podcast and they're saying, okay, I agree with Jarrod. What can I do right now? But before then, any updates you want to give us about the Bondi attack? I mean, there was a beautiful story of the Ahmed Al Ahmed, a Muslim who, shot down
Tackled. He was unarmed.
tackled one of the
I mean, talk
attackers
about an
and injured.
example of like what the paradigm of Christian martyrdom looks like from this Muslim brother who unarmed tackled somebody engaging in a terrorist attack. I mean, that's the kind of Christianity we need. Let's look to our
Yeah,
Muslim
exactly.
siblings and
So
learn.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, there's a lot. I mean, it's like maybe I should have had you on the podcast before to talk about it, but obviously there's the tragic death of innocent of I think 16 or 17 or 15 Jewish Australians, and we saw the heroic act of sacrifice of Ahmed Al Ahmed. Yeah, any kind of like retrospective kind of insight you can give us about that moment. There was a beautiful moment to see the Australian society coming together to support Ahmed Al Ahmed and also to make it clear where they stand on this issue. Any kind of insight you can give for the non-Australians who are listening to this?
Yeah, I'll try and be disciplined and keep it short
Right.
because there's so much to say, Daniel. There's so much to
Okay.
say. It's
Maybe I should bring
actually
you back again to talk about it.
Yeah, sure. I'd be more than happy to, mate. I love hanging out.
Sure.
And let me say, I love the podcast. It's so incredibly important. I love the
Mm.
diversity of voices. I love the way that you're actually able to uplift the Palestinian Christian witness, which has been such a formative um,
Yeah.
uh, testimony, living testimony in my life. It's wonderful. So it's an honor
Thanks.
to be involved.
Thank you,
Um,
Jared.
Maybe I'll just say that unlike other Australian tragedies, Australia didn't come together like we have at other times. In fact, it got politicized by the right really, as in the political right, really quickly. And some of the things that actually stopped that response was the reality of this brave Muslim brother and his actions. But it was, despite the fact that the two terrorists, father and son, um, uh, not migrants, like Australian born, radicalized in the Philippines, identify with the ideology of ISIS. As we've mentioned earlier in the podcast, like a devil created after the invasion of Iraq. It's like, what did Iraq produce? let no one say it didn't produce anything, it was a waste of time. It produced ISIS and all the horror that that has meant. But somehow, as those who are elsewhere in the world are often prone to do, they associated ISIS with Hamas without any recognition of how these groups are actually like have huge differences in ideology, in religion, in like it's not a jigsaw puzzle that neatly fits together. And so suddenly the cause of human rights and Palestinian people on the underside of genocide got associated with these two who have a completely different agenda. And in the pressure after it was politicized so early, there were hate laws which were passed to with the desire to curb hate groups in Australia. Unfortunately, the architecture of those groups was provided by a far-right Zionist lobby group, which it's still... So for those of us who are part of starting and engaged around the world with the Gaza ceasefire pilgrimages, which this Lent, we're going to see maybe 10,000 people on the streets of Cape Town engaging in a pilgrimage for Palestine. That's been this Christian movement that has gone global, and it's been beautiful to see what God has done. It is not clear, Daniel, under these laws, whether we could be possibly charged with hate speech because of and we saw horrific police brutality aimed at the general population, including a grandfather in his 70s who was beaten on TV just a month ago as the Herzog, the president or that's right, isn't it? President versus Prime Minister in
right. Yeah, Herzog is the president of Israel. Right?
President, yeah, thank you. Came to Australia, and there were these mass protests, and we saw ordinary Australian citizens beaten, including people at prayer who were given permission to pray and knelt down, and the Australian police didn't pass along that they were given permission and beat them and violently removed them. And so it's a really a podcast for another time, but
okay.
it is
I mean,
really,
you're
really
making
concerning.
What's
happening here, and it is the largest rollback of civil liberties and human rights I've experienced in my lifetime in Australia, and things are really concerning. And it's not that we don't have a problem with terrorism. It's not that we don't have a problem with hate groups, but they're not in support of suffering Palestinian people. In my city alone this year, Daniel, we've had one terrorist attack that failed because the bomb didn't detonate, and another terrorist attack foiled before it was actually able to be engaged with. And it's coming from young, white, Australian men who have been radicalized online by neo-Nazi hate groups. And both protests were aimed at the Aboriginal community and the migrant community and the Muslim community. And the question is, for those of us who are called to love our neighbors, are we in solidarity? Are we sharing in the sufferings of Christ as he is with these people on the underside of how things work in this reality? Or are we playing chaplaincy to a mainstream Christianity that just wants to add prayers or get opportunities at prayer breakfasts as business as usual continues?
Yeah, that's such an important question. Yeah, thanks for complicating it for me. I had a very rosy vision of what happened. Obviously, aside from the tragic attacks, but that was it's a beautiful thing to see. But of course,
well, Daniel, can I leave you with a beautiful picture?
Yeah, please.
I want to encourage people that one of the things that being a part of the demonstrations and protests and rallies on Wadjuk Noongar Budja, which is found on most maps as Perth, Australia, is that it is wonderful that every single time we've gathered to lift up the reality of the suffering of Palestinian people, that Jewish Australians have been out front calling for an
Right.
end to this. Some of them identifying as Jews against Zionism. That like there has been this incredible witness, and wonderful to see Christians there as well. I'll confess, not in the numbers that I hope, but they're there, and I want people to know that it's not about can we match their power by finding power. It's can we operate in a different kind of power than what we're up against. And as our Lord reminds us, it's about mustard seeds. It's about leaven. And you don't need as much leaven as you need dough. You just need the faithfulness of the few. So I want to encourage your listeners. I want to encourage you. I want to encourage myself, as the psalmist says, like to know that it is the faithfulness of the few, not merely winning over the masses. And actually, Erica Chenoweth, in her studies of nonviolent social change and what's effective, actually shows it to be true. The numbers, studying over 100 years of mass movements, all we need is 3.5% of the population for a nonviolent movement to succeed. So I want to encourage those who are committed to Jesus' way of enemy love as our way of liberation, not our excuse for not seeking liberation. I want to encourage those who are committed to the way of the cross that thank you. It is beautiful and we need more of you. And this podcast is part of that. And I give thanks to God for it.
Thank you, Jarrod. Thank you for that. Let's wrap this up with if you can give us some practical steps on what people can do in this moment, especially because of Iran. Like what some advice, maybe Pastor, I think you helped us a lot thinking theologically and biblically about this moment, but also practically speaking, what kind of advice you can give us as we move forward with this and kind of dealing with this, what we're seeing coming out of Iran?
I have a diagram that is in the post, a starter kit for peacemaking as another illegal war breaks out. And the diagram has these 4 points. And the 4 points are silent prayer, rhythms that ground us, in and for, 2, media intake boundaries, to be informed yet responsive. And that's I'll keep moving on. 3, community support, that don't isolate yourself. It's actually about creating communities of love. 1 person can make a point, 2 people can hold a conversation, but 3 people, Dave Andrews says, can create a space. Create a space where creativity is increased and we can process our grief and we can be a part of collective action. And 4, discerning the next steps. What is the transformative way to compost what we're feeling and take action together? And then it returns to that first step. So I encourage people, learn how to pray. Yes, it's important to say your prayers, but also dare to allow the Holy Spirit to allow your life to become prayer, where everything you're feeling isn't shut down, it's offered back. And you know, there's a section in there where I just touch on it's the difference between going into the silence of the cave like Elijah because God is going to pass by. And some of us are terrified that as we go into the silence, there is this violent wind and there is this earthquake and there is this fire. But it's allowing those things to pass in prayer and discerning that that is not what God is like. So we can hear the still small voice. And much like Elijah's own experience in prayer, after the horror that he was a part of, after he went off script and was responsible for the death of hundreds, he had to deal with all of that lives in him. And it lives in us as well. None of us are not swimming in the stuff that we long to be saved from. We're all part of it. It's in us. And so start with prayer and allow that stuff to pass by. You don't have to wrestle with it. You don't have to engage it. You don't have to do spiritual warfare. Jesus has won that battle. Allow it to pass by so you can listen for the still small voice. And then that's what you take to media boundaries. For me, I'll be honest, my media boundaries is Democracy Now! Update, and that's the only media I actually purposely consume each day. It's tops 15 minutes of my day, but I spend the equal amount of time that I've spent listening in prayer about everything I've heard. I have to compost what I'm hearing. And if I don't have time to pray through what I'm receiving, I need to receive less and increase my prayer. And then that's what you take to community. Try and build that practice. I encourage people listening now, send this episode to a friend. Say, hey, will you be my one or two other person where we can hold ourselves accountable to not endless media intake, but the kind of media intake that we can process in prayer, so we can be about taking creative steps and loving one another in the midst of this war. And then going to that next thing. What is it to take transformative steps of collective action together? And this is all framed in the article around practices for being of service to others in a time of war. I think this is about loving ourselves well and not feeling guilty about our own needs, even while others are experiencing horror, so we can actually be of service instead of add to the reactionary responses that dominate our world.
Jarrod, I needed this. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, this is so important. And yeah, I think this is a good reminder for me to go back to prayer as I deal with all of this. And I also love that composting language you keep using. That's such a beautiful way to think about it, to compost whatever the stuff, the trash.
Paul would use in Philippians 3, it's the crap, man. Like, we've got to do something with it, because otherwise it just stinks. But beauty can grow in it. We just have to do something with it.
Yeah, I mean, this is spring is upon us, so this is really good language for us to think about. Jarrod, I can't thank you enough for the insight, for your pastoral care, for the wisdom you bring to this very hard topic now with this war in Iran. So bless you. Thank you so much, brother.
Bless you, my brother. I'm thankful for you. Keep doing what you do. We need you, Daniel. I'm thankful for you.
Did you like this episode? If so, make sure to follow Across the Divide and share it with friends and family. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, and perhaps leave a comment or a like. It actually helps the podcast to reach more people. To support our work, to get exclusive content, perhaps to join our book club, head over to patreon.com/acrossthedivide.